So I'm here with Phil Friedman, who is the managing director at Port Royal Group, which is marine industry consultants. So Phil, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what Port Royal is?
Yes, I can, I guess. Um, I've spent the greater part of my adult working life in the recreational marine industry in one capacity or another. My background is fairly eclectic. I started I started as a second life in the marine industry, but I started managing a small marina in Port Stanley, Ontario, where I hauled and blocked boats with some of the most rudimentary, crude equipment on Earth, and did bottoms and all sorts of scut work for a while. I had an abiding interest in yacht design and construction, and so while I was doing that, I was studying yacht design with Ted Brewer and Bob Wallstrom in Maine, and went on then to uh, open my own small shop and uh, and began designing and building boats. Uh, Eventually, I became a technical columnist for Pacific Yachting and Canadian Yachting for about 10 years. And then eventually moved back. I'm a US citizen, so eventually moved back to Florida. I ended up in Florida, and where I became the where I did about 9 years of live aboard cruising, and eventually ended up in the Fort Lauderdale area and became the senior editor for Power and More Yacht magazine. Uh, Following that, I moved on to consulting and uh, ended up as the president and CEO of Palmer Johnson Yachts in Sturgeon Bay, Wisconsin, and Savannah, Georgia. We had two big major yards across the United States with a total of about 600 employees. And during that period of time, I built more than a dozen mega yachts in the 120 to 180 foot range.
Wow.
And eventually, when I left there, I went back to consulting and was involved in numerous projects through the years. Along the way, because somebody's going to ask, why am I talking about surveying? Along the way, on an occasional basis, I used to do marine surveys, small craft surveys, and I would say probably a total over a period of 30 years of about 200. And it's the subject of surveys has always been a kind of, I don't want to say pet peeve, but a pet topic of mine, because I think they're generally really misunderstood, both by yacht buyers and yachtsmen and by brokers and salespeople. I hope to I had this opportunity and I thought, well, take the opportunity to shed some light on surveying and what it is and how it needs to be understood.
That sounds really interesting and a very eclectic career. I, it was fun to listen to that. But so most people get a survey done. It's something that anybody buying a boat is told to get a survey. But you've got opinions right off the bat there. So what is different about one survey versus another? Can they vary in quality? Is there something specific people should know?
Well, yes, they should know, first of all, that not all surveys are the same. There are two main categories of surveys. One is the CV or condition valuation survey. The second is a pre-purchase survey, and they're very different. Condition valuation survey is usually performed for somebody who's buying a yacht and who wants to insure it or borrow money on it. So these condition valuation survey it's actually performed for the benefit of either an insurance company or a lender, um, although the buyer of the boat ends up paying for it.
Right.
But the beneficial receiver of that information is either an insurance company or a lender. So that the approach that a surveyor would take with a CV would be very, very different from the approach that he would take or should take in a pre-purchase survey, because in a pre-purchase survey, the surveyor is working primarily for the buyer, and the surveyor's job is to find anything wrong with the boat or anything latently wrong with the boat that might cause a problem in the foreseeable short-term future. Whereas with a condition valuation survey, the surveyor is only looking to establish, or should only be looking to establish, that the insurer has an average risk, no more than an average risk, because their tables are based on calculating averages. They're betting the averages, and they're not looking for perfect boats. They're looking to be able to offer insurance at a rate that will get them to work or get them to sail, but which will not cost them money. And that involves only establishing that a given vessel is an average risk. So that's the first thing to understand. And
Okay.
unfortunately, most buyers are told at one time or another, get a survey. Well, get a survey is too vague to really help them. And very often when you find somebody said, well, my surveyor didn't find such and such, or he didn't mention such and such, it's not the surveyor's fault, really, because the buyer probably was getting the wrong survey, wrong type of survey.
So we'll get into it, I guess, a little bit more, but it sounds like you need to find a specialized surveyor then, who perhaps knows the kind of boat you're looking at, who can find the problems. Is that how you'd go about it, or is there a different step? How do you find the
Well,
surveyor that
most
you need?
most yeah, most surveyors do both types of surveys because they need to keep working. But uh, the requirements for the different kinds of survey, for the two different types of surveys, are different. And so, I mean, I would say, for example, for example, somebody doing a CV condition valuation survey will often work from a simple checklist and provide information about the vessel and its nature, and verify the details of the vessel, and then establish that there's nothing major wrong with the vessel, make some recommendations if there are some items that need to be attended to or corrected, and then render an opinion as to whether the vessel constitutes an average risk for the underwriter, or whether it supports the value that the valuation that the lender needs in order to release funds. That's a lot different from a pre-purchase survey. In the case of a pre-purchase survey, you really need someone who's had, I believe personally, you need someone who has a background in design and construction, repair and maintenance, or refit. You need somebody who's worked on the ground in those areas of the industry in order to understand what's potentially can go wrong in a vessel, what's likely to go wrong, what it's likely to cost to make the corrections. That's what a buyer needs to know, because everything that's wrong with a boat can be fixed at some cost in time and money and aggravation. So the real question is, how much is that, and how do you balance that against the purchase price? And so you need to have some idea of what those costs are going to be. And the best person to give you that kind of idea is somebody who's done that sort of work.
So are you saying that people need both these kind of surveys? Like if you're required to have an insurance survey in order to buy the boat, but you also want to know that it's a correct boat, are you suggesting that it's two surveys that need to occur, or how does a buyer go about that?
Yeah, I would suggest, I mean, personally, what I've always felt is, and this is not a matter of misrepresentation. It's a matter of having some judgment with regard to how much information you present to the person who's reading the survey. And you don't want to give them more information than they need, because that just confuses the situation. And although I would say you could have one survey, a single survey, you would have two different kinds of reports. One report would go to an insurer or a lender, or maybe both, but it would be limited in terms of its scope. I mean, basically because an insurer doesn't really care if the toilet is stopped up.
Right.
If it's not gonna cause a leak in the boat, then they don't care. And to have it in a survey report is just detracts from what you're talking about, to have it in a condition valuation survey report. So you wouldn't have that kind of information in a CV report, but you would have that information in a pre-purchase report, because the buyer wants to know everything, wants to know every little detail that he might have to correct or pay for.
Those sound like the sorts of situations where you've sent your survey to the insurer or the lender, and they have those tasks that maybe need to be done in the next year or so, like rigging changes or things like that. And suddenly your lender is wanting those done beforehand. But when you understand, you know that you've got a little more time. Is that why you would have less information? Is that the sort of thing you're talking about?
Well, I don't think you're trying to keep the information from the people involved. But what would happen is you have to ask yourself, would the person who's receiving the survey and who's relying on it to make a decision about lending or about insurance, whether they would ask these questions in the first place if they were left on their own?
Okay.
And they wouldn't in many cases, because they don't care. It doesn't really affect whether the boat is an average risk or not, whether covering the boat is an average risk, or whether it's worth what somebody wants to borrow against it. So that's really the issue. And so it's not so much a matter of shielding them from the information, but not putting information on the table that nobody knows what to do with or cares about.
Right. So how do you go about requesting that from a surveyor? Will most of them know the difference between these two types of reports, and that's simply what you need to ask for?
Well, they should. I mean, certainly if somebody is certified. By the way, there are two major certifying organizations in the United States, at least, would certify small craft surveyors. Small craft means anything under about 70 meters. There are two organizations. One is NAMS, N-A-M-S, National Association of Marine Surveyors. They're the older organization. Their small craft division evolved out of their ship surveying division, which deals mostly with ships and cargo surveys, damage surveys, and so on. But they found the need to provide training and certification for those members who wanted to do small craft or yacht surveys. The second organization, which is a younger organization, but still has been around, I think, for more than 20 years, is SAMS, S-A-M-S, abbreviated. So they came later onto the scene and provided training specifically in yacht surveying,
Okay.
and then provided testing and certification. But in this case, the procedures that they will follow will be pretty much the same.
So there's not, if you only have a limited choice between surveyors, either accreditation is pretty similar. Is that what you're saying?
That's what I would say. When it comes to a condition valuation survey, what the ultimate requirement is that the survey be accepted. And so the thing you want to do is to, if you can, if you're dealing with a particular insurance company or you're dealing with a lender, the first thing you want to do is you want to contact them and ask them if they have a list of accepted surveyors.
Oh, that's a good tip. Thank you.
Sometimes they will have a list and they'll say, well, these guys, they'll say a SAM surveyor, a NAM surveyor, or somebody on this list, and they'll give you a couple dozen people who they've dealt with and trust. And they'll, because that's what you want. You want them to accept the survey. They don't have to accept the survey. They don't have to accept the survey from anybody. Now, years ago, before NAMs and SAMs were really active in the small craft survey area, a lot of lenders and a lot of insurance companies would accept, they'd review a resume of somebody who was going to present a survey,
Okay.
and they would make a judgment as to whether they trusted that person or not to give them the information. So you would, a lot of what was accepted was based on the development of personal relationships between surveyors and the companies they ultimately sent their reports to. That still can happen.
Right.
There's nothing. Surveying, small craft surveying is not a registered, or a regulated profession.
Okay. So anyone could call themselves a surveyor.
Yes. Well, they have to stand on a rock first, but yes, that's it. So you can still, somebody, if you have somebody who you're doing, let's say you commission someone who you really trust to do a pre-purchase survey, somebody who's very knowledgeable and understands a lot of what's at issue. And you want that person to additionally produce a CV report to go to an insurance company or a lender. Well, that person, you can simply have that person submit a short resume to the lender or to the insurance company and just ask them, is this okay with you? Are you going to accept the survey from this person? And you'll get an answer from the underwriter or from the lender. They'll say yes or they'll say no. It doesn't matter what somebody's credentials are, by the way. If the lender or the insurance company won't accept the survey, it doesn't do you any good.
Right. Okay. So other than going through sort of those two organizations, what are other ways that people can find a surveyor?
Well, as I said, you can check with the people you're going to be dealing with who are going to be getting the reports and having to make judgments on the basis of those reports. And you can ask them if they have a list or any recommendations. If they say no, you can ask, you can look around, talk to other people, other yachtsmen who have purchased yachts and had surveys done, and ask them about their experiences with various people and would they recommend someone. There are a couple of things you have to be careful of. One is that you understand what kind of survey was done, because somebody can say, somebody you might talk to would say, "Oh, I got a survey. The guy was great. He did the boat. He surveyed the boat. I got my insurance. I got my loan. No problems." But that doesn't mean that guy who did that survey is qualified to do a pre-purchase survey.
Right.
If that's what you really are after. If you're after certification, if you're after confirmation that the boat has a certain value or is an average risk for insurance, speaking candidly, you don't care what the surveyor is like. You just want to know that it's going to be accepted.
Right.
It's not, you're not going to make a judgment as to how good the guy is. You don't care as long as his survey is accepted and he gives you what you need.
Okay.
So that's your point of view changes, and that's what you need to understand and keep in mind. If you're asking other yachtsmen for a recommendation, you have to keep in mind that if you want a pre-purchase survey, a true pre-purchase survey, you need to be a lot more careful about whom you hire.
That makes sense. So you've talked a little bit about surveyors sort of giving you an appraisal for the price of the boat. How accurate are those types of appraisals?
Well, this is not going to be a popular opinion, but it's my opinion, based on 30 years plus in the industry. It's not going to be accurate at all.
Okay.
The fact of the matter is that there's no established database for that information. I
Right.
mean, some sales are tracked by some of the multiple listing organizations, uh, but they're all private firms. They have and basically they're tracking information that's supplied to them by their members or people who hire their services. So they're relying on those to be accurate, but they're never accurate. Uh, you know how fishermen always lie about the size of the fish they catch. Well, sellers always lie about what they got for their boats, and brokers especially always lie about what they got for boats because they want to support high prices.
Yeah.
They don't want to encourage people to make low offers or low ball offers. So they don't want to talk about, they don't want to talk about the $2 million yacht that went for $500,000. So they may not report that information. Uh, and so it's not very reliable, which is one thing you might want to do. If you're looking for a valuation to support a loan, then you might want to ask in the beginning a surveyor, the surveyor involved. You might want to say, well, based on an average, assuming that the boat is average, condition. I realize you have to do a survey to establish its actual condition, but assuming that it's an average condition, what would be a reasonable range for valuation in your experience?
Okay.
And if you need a valuation of $700,000, and the surveyor you're going to hire says, oh, probably $300,000,
Right.
You've got a problem. You have a problem. But the same thing is true of house valuation. I know of residential property valuation. There's a lot of talk about, ethics and experience, but you have to recognize there aren't, with regard to land-based properties, you have a lot of comparable data. You know what the sales are, and the actual sale amounts have to be recorded with the county and so on. So there's data to base it on.
Right.
With regard to yachts, it's too spotty, in my opinion.
Right.
to-
Yeah. And
to
you're
give you
looking
any
at all kinds
accuracy.
of different factors, different locations, different markets. So that makes sense. So it sounds like surveys, you've given us some tips on how to make sure you're getting the right kind of survey and what to look for in a surveyor. But are there times when you might forego a survey? Like when would you skip it entirely?
I would think the only time you'd skip it is if you're buying a vessel at a price that you can afford to just throw a total crap on.
So it's
You know,
going to depend on who you are and
yeah.
the simplicity of the boat, anything like that, or a new boat. Do you still do surveys for new boats?
Well, you won't. You could, but with a brand new boat coming out of the factory, what the first step you need to do is to analyze the warranty that you're
Right.
getting, and you need to be very careful about that. There are extensive, there are extensive warranties, and you have to ask yourself is there an unlimited or lifetime warranty on the hull, or is it 2 years or 5 years or 10 years? And if it's a limited time, then the question is, what's included in the warranty? Uh, for many years, uh, manufacturers, boat manufacturers, excluded hull blistering from being a
Yeah.
warrantable defect. They said it was a cosmetic defect and it wasn't a problem, and they never warranted it. It was excluded from the warranties. Back a long time ago, when I was writing for Canadian magazines, I broached the subject in print and said that I really didn't believe that blistering was an act of God, and that since everybody would tell me that, I mean, one of the things that some of the manufacturers told me that no matter what they did, they knew that 3 to 4% of their boats were going to blister.
Right.
So it was like, they had no idea how to stop it. My position was, if you can predict that 3 or 4% of the boats are going to blister, well, then you should be warranting. Build into your warranty reserves enough to cover those boats that are going to blister, because they're going to blister. And I was I was roundly criticized and actually had a few threats at the time because that's an expensive thing to cover.
Yes, yeah.
But eventually eventually warranting blistering became a normal procedure, a regular procedure. So you have to look at the warranty to see what's covered.
Okay.
Then you have to look at the conditions under which you can exercise the warranty. You see, some warranties will tell you you have to deliver the boat back to the boatyard.
Mhm.
Well, if you take a boat that's been shipped, that's been built in Massachusetts, and you ship it to California,
Right.
how are you going to get it back to Massachusetts to have it done? So so nowadays the warranties will sometimes say that you can take it to somebody local who's on their list of approved
Right.
yards. Then you have to ask yourself, who's on the list? But you have to be careful about the warranties. But that affects what you do. About a survey. You can perform a survey prior to accepting a new vessel, new construction. And sometimes that's good to do because there are things that the builder will have to take care of before they deliver the boat to you.
Phil, it
They-
really, oh, sorry, I cutting you
yeah.
off a little bit, but we've got to wrap up. But it sounds like you've got a wealth of information, and I'm sure some of the viewers will want to learn more about you and follow you. So, what are the best ways to stay in touch with you or learn more about your work?
The best way is to go to my Substack hub, which is at www.portroyalgroup.com,
Okay.
where we publish a monthly newsletter and have effectively a website that has often speaks about surveying and construction and problems in construction and so on. It's a wide range of covers a wide range of topics and related. The hub itself is called for yacht buyers. I'm sorry, for yacht builders, buyers, and owners.
Oh, that sounds fantastic, like a lot of information. Well, thank you again, Phil. I really enjoyed learning from you, and I'm sure our readers and watchers will appreciate this.
Well, thank you. Thank you for giving me the opportunity.